Part 98, The Eve of Dissolving the Harem and Farewell with Concubines. Seeing that the court had stabilized, Jun Yi began to formally disband the harem. This time, there was no objection in the court. They were all silent and determined not to interfere in the emperor's family affairs. After all, the few big families who opposed the emperor's dissolution of the harem last time disappeared in just 1 month. It was a pity, but it also made them deeply understand that those who opposed the emperor would not end well. And the concubines in the harem held the latest identities, some were happy, and some were crying. With his new identity, Lu Xuanzhou almost jumped up in excitement, especially when he thought that his small treasury was enough for him to buy a house and put 2 acres of land. From now on, he could live a life of idle clouds and wild cranes. He wished he could leave the palace now. And concubine Ling looked at the latest identity, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He took out a delicate small porcelain bottle from his arms, with a cruel smile on the corner of his mouth. Yi Yang, do you think you can live such a happy life in this life? Oh, you are so naive. He took the small porcelain bottle out. Putting it into his arms, he sneered and called to Xiao Linzi outside the door. Xiao Linzi, go and invite the imperial concubine to come and sit, and say that today is my birthday. And I want the imperial concubine to accompany me on my last birthday. A hint of doubt flashed in Xiao Linzi's eyes. He knew very well that his young master and the imperial concubine had always been at odds, so why did his young master invite the imperial concubine alone? Although he looked puzzled, he didn't dare to ask any more questions, turned around and walked towards Jinghong Hall. Yi Yang learned that concubine Ling invited him to sit in Lingyuan Palace. His back was hairy with fright, and a bad premonition arose, so he shook his head on the spot and refused. I'm waiting for something. I'm afraid I won't have time to accompany concubine Ling today. Let's celebrate our birthday together later. I muttered in my heart, tomorrow the concubines from the harem will be dismissed from the palace, and he will look for me at this time. And I know with my toes that the other party has bad intentions, so I cherishes my life and is determined not to die. But Xiao Linzi looked embarrassed. He was ordered to come to invite the young master imperial concubine. If the young master imperial concubine does not go, how should he send business to his young master? Yi Yang saw his embarrassment and said kindly, why don't you stay in Jinghong Hall tonight? Anyway, concubine Ling will leave the palace tomorrow, and you won't be able to see him in the future. So he can't embarrass you now. Xiao Linzi was even more embarrassed. Although the young master has a weird personality on weekdays, he is still good to him. If he betrayed the young master at this time, he would definitely be angry with the arrogant young master. In order to prevent the young master from resentment on his last day in the palace, he thanked Yi Yang for his kindness and turned to leave. Yi Yang didn't force Xiao Linzi to stay. He yawned and was about to find a clean place to rest for a while when Xiao Shunzi hurried over and said respectfully, young master, concubine Tianzi, please see you. Shu Tianzi. What is she doing here? Yi Yang was a little guessed that he would not allow Shu Tianzi to come. After all, he knew very well that Shu Tianzi wanted to leave the palace, and this time, by dismissing the harem, it happened to fulfill the good thing Shu Tianzi had always dreamed of. Since he couldn't guess Shu Tianzi's intention, he didn't continue to guess, but nodded and said, let her come in. Here, Xiao Shunzi respectfully responded and turned around to invite Shu Tianzi. He didn't make Yi Yang wait long. Shu Tianzi came down to Yi Yang under the leadership of Xiao Shunzi. She was about to salute. Yi Yang stopped her directly, no salute. Just say what concubine Tianzi has to say. Shu Tianzi glanced at Xiao Shunzi. The meaning was obvious. What she was about to say was not suitable for outsiders to observe. Yi Yang understood and said to Xiao Shunzi, I'm suddenly greedy and want some snacks. Go to the imperial dining room and see if there are any delicious snacks. Xiao Shunzi knew that the imperial concubine had something to say to concubine Shu Tianzi alone. So, he hurriedly responded and left quickly. When Xiao Shunzi's figure completely disappeared from sight, Yi Yang looked at Shu Tianzi with a smile on his face. Okay. Let's talk about it. Shu Tianzi smiled a little embarrassedly. After hesitating for a while, she said cheekily, Imperial concubine, you promised me to send me out of the palace. Do you still remember that? Yi Yang was suspicious, wondering what Shu Tianzi meant when she said this. Now that the emperor has dismissed the entire harem, what is she still worried about? Suspicion returned to suspiciousness, but he still nodded, indicating that he remembered. Seeing Yi Yang nodding, Shu Tianzi's smile became more obvious. But now the emperor has let us go out of the palace, the imperial concubine is not worried about my affairs. So should the imperial concubine compensate me? At this moment, Yi Yang finally understand. Co-authoring this, Shu Tianzi is trying to use this matter to exchange some benefits for himself. Just say whatever you want. He didn't guess her intention just now. Shu Tianzi smiled a little embarrassedly, lowered her head and said in a low voice, I want the method and formula of milk tea. She knew very well that she would not be able to go home after leaving the palace. You have to rely on yourself, or you will starve to death outside. In order to prevent such a thing from happening, he had the cheek to come to Yi Yang for the method and formula of milk tea. Yi Yang was only stunned for a moment, then smiled, it's simple. If it's not enough, I can give you another cotton candy machine. Hearing the cotton candy machine, Shu Tianzi's black pupils flashed a surprise light. Really? This is simply a surprise. Yi Yang smiled and nodded. He actually admires Shu Tianzi. She is very talented as a businessman, and she knows how to plan ahead. No matter where she is, she can get along well. After seeing Shu Tianzi away, Yi Yang just sat down, and Xiao Doubting came to report again. Young master concubine Ling asks to see you. When he heard young master concubine Ling, Yi Yang's back was hairy, and he shook his head and refused. No. He is not stupid. This seeing concubine Ling is completely self-abuse at this juncture. But, Xiao Doubting looked hesitant. But seeing Yi Yang's firm attitude, he didn't dare to say more, and turned around to leave. As soon as he turned around, concubine Ling appeared in the front yard. He rushed over to stop concubine Ling's way, but concubine Ling dodged, easily avoiding his obstruction, and walked towards Yi Yang. Prince Concubine, my young master doesn't have time to see you today. Xiao Doubting hurriedly followed in the footsteps of concubine Ling, but by the time he followed, concubine Ling had unscrupulously walked into the main hall of Jinghong Hall, looking at the person who was drinking tea, enjoying Yi Yang at a good afternoon tea time. Yi Yang raised his eyes and glanced at concubine Ling, who had trespassed into his palace without authorization, raised his eyebrows, and asked concubine Ling with a defiant expression, Why? You were reluctant to part with me, so you came to see me for the last time? Concubine Ling looked at him with a face. The provocative Yi Yang found a place to sit down on his own. He crossed Erlang's legs, looked at Xiao Doubting, who was chasing after him, and said, Bring a cup of tea to this concubine. Xiao Doubting didn't know whether to give concubine Ling or not. After serving tea, he looked at Yi Yang helplessly. Yi Yang nodded and motioned for him to pour tea. Xiao Doubting looked at concubine Ling again and made sure that he did not have any weapon on him, so he left the main hall with confidence. After Xiao Doubting left, concubine Ling looked at Yi Yang, and the corner of his mouth raised a self-mockery. Yi Yang, did you know? I used to be really jealous of you. You are obviously not as good as me. But you are crawling on top of my head everywhere. I really want to kill you at all costs. Yi Yang looked at concubine Ling with a self-deprecating expression, suspicious in his heart. Obviously concubine Ling was saying that he wanted to kill him, but for some reason, there was no malice in his tone. Instead, it was full of sarcasm. While his thoughts were wandering, concubine Ling suddenly got up and quickly took out something from his sleeve. Yi Yang's face turned pale with fright, but it was too late to hide. Something pierced into his chest. There was a slight pain in his chest. He frowned and looked down at his chest, only to see a dark brown rough dry branch on his chest. Seeing that it was just a dead tree branch, the heart that had just stopped for 2 seconds suddenly thumped, and jumped wildly, as if to say, "It's very dangerous, I almost died." Hee hee. You look scared. Concubine Ling looked at Yi Yang, who was terrified. His face showed the pleasure of revenge. He put away the rough branches in his hand, looked at Jun Xiaowu who came in, and shrugged. "I just kidding, don't be angry." Jun Xiaowu, one of the dark guards personally trained by the current sage, exuded a chilling chill, staring coldly at concubine Ling. Although he was calm on the surface, his heart was beating wildly with fright from concubine Ling's actions just now. If concubine Ling was holding a dagger just now, then young master of imperial concubine must have been seriously injured at this time. Thinking of the young master imperial concubine if he died because of his carelessness, his whole body trembled slightly with fear. Are you joking like this? Yi Yang looked angry. His heart was still beating wildly because of the fright just now. It seemed that he was really frightened by concubine Ling's actions just now. I don't mean to warn you. Because someone wants to kill you like this. Concubine Ling stood up straight, tucked the rough branch into his sleeve, and looked to the side with a wary expression. He said lightly to Jun Xiaowu, "What you need to pay attention to concubine Liang, he is going to kill the young master imperial concubine." Concubine Ling left those words and left, leaving behind the two with a confused look. Is the tendon in concubine Ling's head wrong? It took a long time for Yi Yang to come back to his senses, with an unbelievable look on his face, that concubine Ling, who always wanted to kill himself to feed the dog, reminded him that concubine Liang wanted to kill him. Is this possible? Maybe it's a scam. Jun Xiaowu doesn't believe in concubine Ling. After all, it's not a matter of a day or two for concubine Ling to dislike the imperial concubine. I think so too. Yi Yang nodded in agreement, but still a little scared in his heart. He chose to be a tortoise with a shrunken head, and honestly nestled in Jinghong Hall, deciding not to go anywhere. Young master. Lu Kairan has an audience. Xiao Shunzi walked into the hall and said respectfully. Lu Kairan is Lu Xuanzhou. He has a good relationship with Lu Xuanzhou on weekdays. Thinking that he will plan to meet tomorrow, and he will not know when we meet again in future. So, he nodded, let him come in. Walking into the main hall, he looked at Yi Yang on the first seat. His eyes filled with tears. Yi Yang was most afraid of Lu Xuanzhou crying, so he quickly diverted Lu Xuanzhou's attention. Lu Kairan, you will be free tomorrow. Have you decided where to live? When he mentioned this, Lu Xuanzhou had already planned to suppress the tears in his eyes. He replied with a smile, I plan to find a small town. Then buy 2 shops and rent them out, and then buy 2 acres of land to lease out. As for me, while collecting rent, I'm looking for delicious food everywhere. Lu Xuanzhou was completely gone. It's just a pity, no matter how beautiful the food outside is, it's not as delicious as brother Imperial Concubine's craft. Yi Yang laughed dumbly, don't be sad. Maybe I will let someone open a restaurant outside in the future. then you can come and take care of my business. Open a restaurant. Lu Xuanzhou's eyes flashed. It's not that he praised Yi Yang, but the food that Yi Yang studied. The business of opening a restaurant outside is absolutely booming. Thinking of the food that he couldn't finish in the future, Lu Xuanzhou left with satisfaction. But he just walked to the door. When he remembered something, he turned back, walked to Yi Yang, lowered his voice and said, "Brother Imperial Concubine, in fact, the Emperor invited me to the Xingchen Palace in those few days, but he didn't touch me." Yi Yang was stunned. For a moment, his heart was instantly surrounded by excitement. And the whole mind echoed that the Emperor didn't touch Lu Xuanzhou. The Emperor didn't touch Lu Xuanzhou. With this unexpected joy, Yi Yang couldn't hide the joy on his face. And even his eyes turned towards Lu Xuanzhou more amiable. Seeing Yi Yang happy, Lu Xuanzhou smiled. It seems that the imperial concubine, who doesn't care about the emperor on the surface, actually cares a lot in his heart. He was a little envious of Yi Yang. How many people dreamed of being a man above 10,000 people alone? But envy is envy. He is not jealous at all. After all, the imperial concubine is so good, he deserves it. After sending off Lu Xuanzhou, Yi Yang received several concubines one after another until